Today I'm in Birmingham. I am catching up with Nicola Graham and we're going to be talking about identity and what that means for anyone really, but particularly as a practitioner. I remember when I did the life stories with Nicola and she talked about how much she felt like she'd lost her identity when she stopped her registration as a physio. So anyway, hope you enjoy. Let us know what you think. Nicola, identity. So one thing that I remember from our life stories is that you were talking about how hard you found it when you didn't continue your registration as a physio. So just talk to me a bit more about how that happened and what the main issue was for you.
Yeah, I think we have like different phases or chapters of our life, and we have these titles or maybe kind of the identity of what we're associated with in them. And moving from, so it became quite easy that if someone goes, what do you do? Which is obviously quite a common question people actually ask, then I can say I'm a physio. And when I decided to cease my registration with HCPC, because I'd stopped clinical work, but when the round of registration came around, I was like, this is the point where I really need to draw a line in the sand. I realised how attached I was to the title physiotherapist for positive reasons, but also I suppose the other side of that is then you're associated with a label or your identity is associated with that label rather than who you are as a person. So the positive sides were it's a well recognised and respected profession. It allowed me to kind of work and travel internationally. I loved the fact that we classed as like autonomous practitioners. So there were some really like positive aspects that came with that. And obviously it allowed me to have that career to date. But the realisation of how hard it was to leave that title also was a bit of a warning bell around identity and labels. And I suppose I've therefore gone a bit of a journey to find more around like skill sets and characteristics rather than be associated with a specific label or a title kind of going forward.
Yeah. So did you feel proud to be a physio then? When people would ask you that, how did you feel when you'd speak to them?
So I'd say mixed, because you get the, I'm a physio, and then you get the standard, can you have a look at my groin? Which happens, or also quite a misconception or a misunderstanding of, so you only work in sports, where obviously physiotherapy as a profession spans a huge amount of different disciplines. So you do a lot of massage. So I think there's also a big misconception, but that's probably not solely related to physio. Like if other people said what they do completely in different domains, like data engineer, well, there's loads of different ways that a data engineer could work. So I don't think but I was very proud to be a physio. And for many reasons, but mostly because I do think it's a pretty well-respected profession within healthcare as well. And it gave me loads of opportunities and different and real purpose and joy in work.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? Because like, if you think of for anyone, whatever profession they're in, when people say, what do you do, is such a common question that you get asked. People talk about elevator pitches and all of those things, and it's still difficult to really say something that you can say with conviction, because you can get these pre-scripted things, I'm here to transform the MSK industry or any of that stuff, and I found it very difficult to say that stuff with authenticity, and yet that is a very common question. So how would you, when people would ask you about you, how early on would you bring up the fact of what you did as a profession?
Probably quite early, but let's discuss that. Do you think it's the right question that people should ask? What do you do?
No, it's a really lazy question, isn't it? It's a very standard, but it's the same as when you're in these small talk things, which can be pretty painful.
But do you remember that talk we went to at the Tate Modern? And I'm going to forget his name, but the guy said you should say something interesting about the person, not about what do you do. The American guy.
Oh yeah, Jeff.
Yes, Jeff. Yes, and it was more like I love the colour of your socks.
Yes.
Or like something very personable, something, but not related to a label or an identity that actually isn't them, or it isn't fully them. That's maybe what they do Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. No one works those hours anymore, but you know what I mean? But that's not them as a whole person, and that's only a chapter of their life anyway. So, yeah, I think definitely I agree. I do think it is a bit of a lazy question, but it's as you say, it's a very, very common question. So now when people say, what do you do? I'm slightly more vague as like, I work in health and human performance. So I talk more probably about the market than I do about a specific role or a title, because I do wear lots of different hats. And also sometimes, like, if you start with like just a snippet, then if they're interested, then they'll ask a follow-up question and then it will lead on. But I think sometimes people are just asking that question to fill time or space. So they're not really that interested in what you do. So you have to kind of, you then find maybe a commonality, maybe around the market or study or an interest, and then that might lead on to a conversation. But I was listening to something around why we like labels, and there is psychology about it, and it is around that laziness. It helps our brains to create comfort, I suppose, quite quickly, because you can then segment people with labels, and those don't have to be job title labels. They can be related to socioeconomics or geographies, or it just allows you to quite quickly make a connection that allows you to kind of then segment people. But by doing that, we close off thought processes as well, and I suppose it stops curiosity around, well, what else could I do? So if you also, the downside of being associated with a label or an identity is that becomes all you know. So by saying I'm a physiotherapist, it's like I'm a physiotherapist and full stop, where actually, and that is fine, but that may not be your whole career forever, or that may not be your desire at that point. So being able to have kind of more of a, I suppose, open mindset and not let the identity or the label stop your curiosity or your development would definitely be the aspect that you have to consciously work on.
Yeah, it is. I think it is. It does give. Like, I think you're right. Putting people in boxes. It's like, oh right, okay, yeah. Oh right, yeah, I know what that. Yeah, I know physio.
Which is a huge amount of assumptions, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, okay. And then it's like, right, nice one. Then right, yeah. Did you watch the footy last night or something? Isn't it? But it is. That is the. Whenever a guy meets a guy, if they don't know football, it's like, shit, like what you know, this is, but that is just, but that I definitely will fall into that category of things as well. But it does really stop genuine connection, doesn't it? And then maybe you could dig a little bit deeper. It's like, oh right, okay, whereabouts have you done that? Right, well, you studied. Oh, I studied there. I was doing sports science or business or whatever.
Yeah.
But trying to get to more personal things, I guess, is what it is. Personal, but hopefully not too invasive.
Yeah.
But you know, I'd actually forgotten about what Jeff had said there. But I think that's good, as long as it comes across as being genuine. And not weird.
Yeah.
Because it could be a bit weird, couldn't it?
It could be, but I also do like when people keep me on my toes. Like, that lazy part of that conversation will mean that you will have the conversation could continue, but you're not really processing it, and you're going through the theatre of the conversation, but you're not thinking about your next question or even listening to even their answer. So it's a very superficial communication style. But if someone says something to you that makes you go, oh, I didn't really think about my socks today, but thank you, it completely changes the vibe of a conversation, doesn't it?
It does.
And I personally really like when things like that happen, because it makes human interaction much more enjoyable as well.
Definitely. I mean, I'm going to go off on a slight tangent here, and hopefully Gabby, it doesn't watch this podcast, but like when I was single, so like if you think of when you're going to speak to a girl or speaking to them, and it's just, oh, you look great, can I buy you a drink? It's just like, yeah, whatever, next one. Whereas if you do go in with something a bit more random,
yeah,
which I did actively think about when you're doing those things, but it gets people to actually think, oh, right, that's quite a weird thing to say. Like that, I might be a bit more intrigued by those things.
Yeah.
but they can take that into any walk of life.
Yep.
Actually, you're just going through the motions, just that, and it's just like I really don't like that. But going back to your feelings, so when you bought the practice, what did you introduce yourself as then?
So we had a receptionist at the time who used to quite openly call me the boss in front of like patients and things like that. I cringed inside massively all the time. Firstly, because I didn't like it as a term, but also I suppose I was still trying to wear multiple hats at that point, and because I was still working as a physiotherapist. Then I'd done some Pilates training, so I was also the Pilates instructor, and I was the boss in terms. But at the same time, and this is one of the reasons why I stopped clinical practice, I was also becoming I had children, so I was becoming a mum. So you have to find these different identity labels and navigate through them. And also I did put something on LinkedIn this morning about my strategy work that I now do and how I wear different hats when I'm doing that, from a strategist to an advisor to a facilitator to a coach. And someone's commented saying kind of like a chameleon. And I actually think that is a bit of a super skill if people can adopt that, because it means you can create value for the work that you do in different environments as well. So you're not, again, if you put yourself in a box, other people are putting you in a box as well, because they'll be like, oh, well, we only need you for this reason. And actually, if you can create scenarios and environments where you can add value in different ways, then that's helpful. So going back to your kind of question, I didn't feel comfortable because I don't think I felt comfortable, or I didn't know which hat I was meant to be wearing. So years ago, kind of early in my career, and it probably comes through a lot of the physio training, it's like things had to be for me quite black or white, right or wrong. And I wanted to do things well. And so if you're having to wear multiple hats doing different jobs, that's quite confusing, or it's quite challenging actually. And it takes quite a lot of brain scope and everything. And when you're sleep deprived new mum, that's not what you've got. And that's why I dropped being a physio. It wasn't that I stopped loving the work I was doing. I solely felt I was doing 2 to 3 jobs at that point badly. One being a mum, or one being kind of at home, so family life, one being a physio, and one trying to run the business. So if I was with a patient, I was thinking about things I needed to do from an admin management perspective. When I was doing admin management, I was then thinking about my patients and had I followed up or written their exercise program. And so it just felt like too much at that stage. That's why it was easier for me from the chapter of my life to be able to do admin management at all hours of the day, where I couldn't see patients in that way. So I was kind of forced into that journey. But I didn't stop. Yeah, I definitely didn't. I missed patient interaction, because in healthcare and generally in sport and human performance, the impact that you have with people, be it getting them to run something that they couldn't do before, or climb a flight of stairs that they couldn't do, or stand up unassisted, like whatever that goal or objective is, watching or helping someone else achieve that is highly, highly rewarding. But I couldn't do that in the same way. So yeah, being called the boss was cringy. But also I think slightly maybe not completely unique, but different, was I'd done a management buyout. So I'd been at the physio level with the practitioners as part of the team. And then suddenly I bought the practice that I was still working at. And so then I had to split between the two. And I was really, really bad at creating boundaries and distinction between that. So because I still wanted to be part of the team, but actually I had to make then the tough decisions around what that meant for the business. So I think a lot of it was a lack of experience, maturity, ability, or confidence, self-confidence, and and I didn't lean into kind of mentorship or support networks at that point. Tried to do everything myself and get it right and put a lot of pressure on myself, rather than be more open about it, which I definitely recognise as a strength if you can do it in your career now.
So when your colleague was saying that to you, was there any, what was the connotation that they were saying it as? Because it's people do it, but it sometimes, because people have done it to me, and it sometimes feels a little bit like, are they giving you a bit of stick here? Like, is there some underlying tone to this?
Yeah, I think there's lots of factors. Like, I think age comes into it sometimes. Like, if you're a younger boss to like staff, how does that fit? If you're like, I suppose I'd bought my way to leadership rather than not earned it. I don't know, but it's how how those transitions are also navigated is quite a big deal. But I agree. I think being called the boss is sometimes a way for them to not pass the buck to you, but put undue spotlight on you that isn't necessary in that situation sometimes. What contexts have you had it in then that it's...
I think just people say it, and yeah, I feel like there is a not always, not that it's a, again, this is my own insecurities and things. You made us think, are they just, yeah, maybe it is passing the book. I don't know what it is, but I don't particularly like it. But also, maybe I do like it a little bit because it's like, well, yeah, I am in charge. It's actually quite nice to feel like that is that you've got that. But it's a funny thing. Like I struggle with what, even now, like people say, what do you do? Like to say I'm CEO, MD, it doesn't feel like, because we're a relatively small company. I don't know. I cringe a little bit as to what it is.
Yeah.
So you end up just being like, I don't know, the director or something.
Yeah.
Like relative. Well,
Managing
try not to title it in a way.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, yeah, I don't know. I struggle with any bit of it. But it's like for us, when I would say, essentially, if people say to you, right, what are you, salesman? People are like, oh yeah, right, instantly, right, okay, yeah. This is some sleazy, I think, is the most common thing. Like even chatting to people now, you know, a good friend, and even he, when I had a meeting with him recently, he was like, oh yeah, someone could have just thought I was just some salesperson in there. So even then I was sort of like, okay, right. So that there's still, even though I'm very well established, there's still those connotations of people around sales.
Yeah.
And it's that's normal, but it's like, well, how do you, I hate that, like really. It's like, well, that's, even though that is true, it's like I actually don't like it, because it's like whether it's again insecurities or you want to be not different, but you want to be accepted. I guess it's that acceptance of being a part of it rather than, oh, do you want to come to this? Do you want to sponsor it? You come and exhibit, and it's just like, well, no, we feel like we're a part of this, not being on the periphery.
I think you're highlighting like a massive distinction between transactional relationships and relationships.
Yeah.
So people don't like sleazy sales because they either are mismatched, as in you're trying to sell me something that I'm not interested in, aggressive, or could be aspects around like they just want my money and that's it. So there's no long-term benefit, there's no long-term value, there's no relationship aspect to it. It's very transactional. Where anyone that's kind of worked in healthcare or there's much more of a relationship-driven, a focus on long-term outcomes, value. Even if we don't see that from the commercial side, we should want to see people go from A to B and be with them through that journey. So that's the kind of like coaching aspect, because it's only then that you know, did I actually make it, like the actual outcome is when you know, did anything before that make any difference? So we're not on journeys for the sake of being on journeys. We want, the reason to do it is to create an outcome, and that milestone may move on and improve or increase, but you want an output to it, or you should want, that is longer than just a transaction of money. So there's something more human driven, something more relationship driven there. But you were a practitioner.
Well, yeah, I mean, so we had a clinic, so sports science background.
Yeah.
So we did sessions on the Alter G, but really not much. Really,
Okay.
it wasn't.
So you
really
didn't
on
see that as a
aspect.
transition period of
Not
your
at
career?
all. No, not at all, really. So no, so I'd done sports science, but it was really when I got my previous job, it was on the business side of things.
Yeah, okay.
And then when we had the clinic, I would do certain sessions, but it was very limited, and that was one of the reasons why we stopped doing the clinic, was that having to go and do an appointment at 9 o'clock for
Yeah.
40 quid. It was like, oh my, I just do not want to be doing this.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with it, it's just like there's other things that you want to do.
Yeah.
So again, it's trying to identify that piece of it.
But that's the key really around this identity aspect, isn't it? Is if you associate yourself with a title, you will be driven by the environment or the assumptions or the context of what that title means or the systems that it exists in. If you are driven more internally by who you are as a person, then you will make work, in its broadest sense, work for you. And that would mean knowing I don't want to go out and work at 9 p.m. in the evening. So it's not, some people would do that because they do it for the title or for the job, where other people are like, no, so it's like it's your priorities, I suppose, within a hierarchy or a structure as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it is definitely identifying. I think it was Dan Houser was talking about knowing what you want to do and what you're driven by with these things.
Yeah.
Like he wanted to go to the States. And I think it's really good to say, actually, yes, what do you want to do? What do you need to do? And being driven by those ones, they're very different things.
And that's when then the title becomes less relevant. It's like, I want to work in this environment with X, Y, and Z kind of characteristics. And it's like, well, the title of what that job is may differ actually then. You may have a skill set that works in that environment, but actually what the title is doesn't really matter. And I've never been that interested in titles of a role. It's more like, what does it look like? What value am I adding? Am I going to get from it? I've slightly even, like, some people would be very specific of that I want a salary at this point. And it's like, well, I don't think like that short term, because it might be that the salary might be slightly less, but there's some training or opportunity that means that I know that that's got longer term value that will occur at a later date. And therefore I don't need it to be a short term in my paycheck, in my bank that month, because there's going to be a longer term piece to it. So that all of those aspects are really, really personal.
Yeah, and I think it's identifying what you want that to be. But I think on that point, so I'll see someone on LinkedIn, and I don't know them, but I've heard you talk about them, or I've seen their content, I think that looks interesting. So I often will just like say, LinkedIn, right, how are you doing? Love to meet you for a coffee. Sometimes it's like, oh, right, okay, yeah, and they might know me or know of me. Sometimes if they don't, you can just see it, which I guess is completely normal. I'll be like, right, so what do you want to meet about? Like, what do you want from this? And genuinely from my side is like, I have got no agenda whatsoever in most contexts. Just be like, your stuff looks interesting, let's have a chat and go. But I also get as well, I'm not saying that they should just say, oh yeah, right, Andy's messaging me, let's go and chat to them, because if they don't know who I am. But also, I feel like, I suppose that is knowing who you are and thinking, actually, I've got no particular thing here, but I always believe, if you're in roughly the same sector as, say, you and I are, we connected like 18 months ago, whatever it was, we've met up loads of times, nothing specific on things yet, but I just really enjoy it. And that's what I love doing, is like having these sort of chats on that, and that doesn't really fit into any box. And maybe we've got the luxury of, because of the stuff that we've done previously, that we're making an income from bits which are associated with it. So yeah, I think it is right. It's like, really, in an ideal world, this is my ideal thing that I would want to be spending all my time doing.
Yeah.
Is speaking to you, how can we help the industry and moving from there? That doesn't really fit into, How would you identify that? Like, what is that?
Well, there's different aspects of it. Maybe it's around thought leadership in a space. Maybe it's around personal development, coaching. But at the end of the day, you do still have a business that has to run. So it's like someone has to do that role if you don't want to do it to some degree as well, or not want to do it. But I think it's also okay to understand that at different chapters of your life, either a business changes or a role or an environment changes, that your skill, like you should be self-aware enough to say, my skill set actually doesn't meet this area now. I definitely felt running my physio business, personally, so there were a couple of different factors of why I sold the business in October 24. Part of it, I thought the market was changing, and I felt quite vulnerable as a small independent business. I know it's very controversial around consolidation and investment into MSK and healthcare as a whole, and people have different opinions on that. But I did feel really vulnerable as a small business, having gone through COVID and definitely had the fear of, that's it, it's gone completely. Having to work up the enough energy to reopen those businesses and then get shut down again, and then reopen them again, and take everyone on that journey.
The energy.
It's really, really draining. So I think I felt like I'd given everything I could for those 10 years that I'd owned that business. And to me, it was really important that that business had existed pre-me, because it had been going since 1984 and I'd done a management buyout, and I wanted it to exist after me. And that meant succession planning and it being part of a different group. The aspect around that is that my skill set had changed, and therefore I didn't believe I was the best person to run that business anymore. So again, I think that comes down to that identity, that I didn't feel comfortable being called the boss or as the MD, because I knew it was, I knew that wasn't what I was going to be in 20 years' time, maybe as well. So I think, what am I getting at here? It's okay to probably have a label or a title at different points of your career, but you don't want to be so attached to them that if a situation changed or an environment changed or your personal needs changed, that you didn't feel like you were losing part of you by moving on to something new.
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah, I feel I think be careful what I say down there, but it's like, I think I'd be delighted if I wasn't managing director of PhysiQuip to some extent, and it's not that I don't love it, I absolutely love it, but I think it's the point that you mentioned there. Like, I think I've changed a lot in my way that I feel like I set it up, it was just me doing it, so I was doing everything, and I feel like I am an organised person. And it's whether or not I'm losing interest in doing that, or I'm losing, maybe it is losing interest, but I just feel like it's detail, operations, that stuff. Get someone else in who loves doing that sort of stuff. Even running the sales team, Dom's taken over that this year, doing a miles better job than me. And I'm delighted with it. And it's almost, there's a guilt that comes with it, rather than it being, I'm sorry that I've lost the title. It's not that at all. It's like, actually, I feel guilty for not doing those things.
Yeah.
So it's a slightly different approach to it.
Yeah, but that is the difference in skill sets. Like a business, and I learned this through a guy that's done some consultancy work with us at Hytro, it's like the difference between a startup and a business. A startup is like a testing machine, you're learning new things all the time. And so when I took on like TOPS and managing it, we're trying new classes, we're doing different things, we're trying new systems. Like that was some people hate that time. I love that time because you're learning constantly, it's new things. When something becomes a business, it's got repeatable, scalable processes. Some people thrive in that environment, other people don't. And so when the business was running well and it didn't really require me, I'd be like, what should we do next? We need something new, where other people would be really happy with that kind of environment. So I think nothing's right, nothing's wrong. It's just being self-aware enough of that, and that actually, if operational growth, but nothing needs like massively innovating or changing. It just needs to be repeatable and then become scale it out, make that growth more, then maybe that is someone else's skill set.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we've been going 13 years, but I still feel like we're a startup. That's the mentality. And I don't feel like I'll ever not have that. Similar to you, it's like ideas, and it'll do people's heads in. But that's the way that but then again, I want the stability. I don't want to do the stable bit of it. I think that's probably what I'm getting to with my bit of it, is having that stability, but then being able to have the freedom to do creativity and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, for you in Hydro then, so when you'd kind of made that transition to being a strategist in human performance and so on, and then how did you feel when you'd got into that? Because you'd had that sort of interim period where you wanted to sell tops, hadn't happened at that point, but you were transitioning. Like, how did you feel at that point?
Yeah, so I did an MBA kind of during COVID. I think primarily I was like, if this business goes, what is it going to be on my CV that allows me to kind of transition into new roles? And so I felt like I had a lot of like commercial experience and operational experience, but I wanted the qualification. I do love a degree. It's my third one. So I wanted that on my CV and that felt like a bit of a validation. You could question all of that around, do you actually need that from an identity perspective? But at that point, I did feel like I did. And so that opened my mind massively to different frameworks and tools and learnings and different industries. And that I really enjoyed. And so I think in some ways, my curiosity probably outgrew what I was doing at Tops on an operational level. And to me, I then always had two buckets between like operation and strategy. And I didn't want to be the operator any more, but I wanted to explore what this whole kind of strategic world looked like. And so I did so I started doing some consultancy or like very informal advisory work with Hydro. And then from there, that led to more kind of retainer permanent work. That then, when I started then, I suppose, posting things on LinkedIn about thoughts or tools or frameworks or different aspects around strategy, that then led to doing some work for an investment house. That's then led to conversations with other investors around like my next thing is I'd like to do some like board positions. So having like different impact and different conversations at that strategic level has been really, really interesting. It's also highlighted as a small business, we tend to do a lot of, I wore multiple hats. So you do a bit of finance, a bit of HR, a bit of marketing, and you realize you have no idea about any of those, because it's then when you get to like a big business and you've got a specific person from marketing and brand and a specific CFO, you're like, wow, that's a skill set that you have to, as a small business owner. That's probably that's the biggest aspect of why I didn't like the title boss, is because I had probably a huge amount of imposter syndrome about all the things I didn't know, and the expectation that if you're the boss, you know everything. And I didn't. I was having to fudge my way through HR, fudge my way through bookkeeping, and fudge my way through marketing. So it's probably that aspect of people have imposter syndrome because they care about the output of what their work is, or they're in an uncomfortable place. And so, yeah, that's probably why I didn't like the term boss, actually. But yeah, going back to that kind of transition stage. So then strategy for me, and then I went and did a course on strategy design and facilitation implementation. And that then started bringing in aspects around coaching. And you realise actually as a practitioner and as a physio how much coaching you do and how much communication you have to do with people. So I really like this ability now, as I said, to wear different hats, where I can give advice on the sector and the market because I've worked in it for 20 years. I can facilitate meetings and strategy sessions. I can ask coaching. I wouldn't call myself a coach, but I can ask coaching style questions because I had to do that through physio, and actually that comes down to then advanced communication and curiosity. and sometimes there's a bit of there's also alongside that a lot of strategy work of, well, what are we actually going to do? And it's not just what are we going to do, what are we not going to do, and trying to design out that whole process as well. So I like all those different hats in there. But I've had to, and we talked about whether we were going to talk about this, but I've had to like not become too labelled to that part of my identity, because just like when I had to have a bit of a break in time off work maternity-wise, I'm now going to have a bit of a break in time off work health-wise. And that feels hard again, because I feel like I'm going to lose connections, network, relevancy, knowledge, things will move on. So you're kind of like, that return to work period will be interesting again. And when anything life-changing happens, it makes you reevaluate all perspectives and things as well. So it will make me really think about, where do I even want to work and what environments and who with and things like that as well.
And have you been able to think about that stuff? Obviously there's bigger priorities, and straight away it's like, even when you mention it to me, it's like, that's just shit for one. And it does just make you think, God, you've got to really be enjoying or finding contentment in whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
So how are you feeling about it at the moment then?
All right. So what have I done? So I stepped down as a director of Musculoskeletal Partners Network, which is a trade organisation in MSK, driving quality standards and MSK care. And that was hard, in that was a real lifeline for me during COVID. Like, that created the MSK network that I didn't feel I could get into, or I didn't have access to back in COVID. So I'm really, I think it's a great organisation, and I love that they're doing some now work with Physio First, and there's some real alignment there around priorities within MSK care, especially around data and objectives, and driving up recognition and value of physiotherapy, or MSK services as a whole, I should say. But I also, as a director, I came on as a director when I owned a clinic. I had stopped working clinically, but I was still very much involved with the team. And so I think I added quite a lot of value in those years of membership, but also 2 years as a director. But that was one of the first things that I thought, I know I'm not as, let's use the word interested again, because it's not my area of focus at this point now. So that I knew I wasn't going to come back to, and so I quite quickly put in my resignation as a director and stepped down. Tops my physio business, I was meant to be doing a consultancy kind of implementation integration period. We've had to expedite that to a quicker point. And I don't know what the future holds, whether they'll need me or not need me as a consultant kind of going forward. And that I'm quite relaxed about. Haicho have been fantastic, and Raj in particular, the CEO of, we want you, but we want you when we can have you, and we understand that we don't know what that looks like at the moment going forward. So for context for any, I suppose, people listening, I've got breast cancer, and so I'm going to have treatment in 10 days time or so, which will be surgery, and then I will need chemo at some point, but I don't know what that whole regime looks like. So the hardest thing I would say is not being able to kind of plan out and be organised like I like to be for the rest of 2025. So I've got to, so how do I feel? I feel a bit lost, but that's okay. I'm going to have to embrace that. And I feel much more established, I suppose, within my career place, the skill sets I have and the networks I'm part of, that I can take a period of time away and not come back on the back foot.
I mean, you're one of the most positive, smartest people that I know in this. I'm well connected and respected in the area, so I'm sure you're not going to be cut off from it. Certainly not from me and the people that we're good friends with that are mutual. But no, I can imagine. It's just, as we were saying before, it's just crap, isn't it? And it's like this stuff happens, but it doesn't change the fact that it's just really, really bad when it does.
But if we bring it back to identity, what I don't want also is I suppose you don't want then the identity associated with something like I don't want to be, oh, you know, the one that had breast cancer, but that's natural as well, because that's how we make associations with things or people. So identity and labels could come from like a professional title perspective, but they can also happen with things that, like, you'll probably moan at me for this, but like you probably get, oh, you know, Andy, the one that takes selfies all the time.
I don't mind that. I actually like that.
But you know, like, people make associations, and that's okay. But you just can't, like, their associations don't have to be your associations, I suppose, as well, don't they?
Yeah.
Like, you know, you're more than a selfie. I know I'll be more than breast cancer.
Yeah, no, I think it's trying to get comfortable with whatever that is. I think as long as you internally can be comfortable with it, whatever it is, that's the main thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because otherwise you do have that imposter syndrome, fear of judgment, whereas really, does anyone really give a shit about this stuff? There's obviously, like in your case with the health stuff, of course people are, you know, they're supportive, and it's difficult sometimes to know how to deal with that from an external perspective, but ultimately it is what it is with all of these things. Whether I mean, I do selfies and I like doing it. I've actually got no problem with that bit of it, but yeah, it's actually no one's as bothered about the stuff as you make up in your own mind.
Yeah, there's definitely that thing about you overthink it. Like the scenarios in your head are always worse than actually what is happening, because everyone's got their own shit going on, and everyone's got their own life going on, and actually we're not as important as we probably think we are half the time.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, but like we had this event at our place recently, and one of the guys came over, so like a high profile person in sport, and he's like, Andy, I love your stuff, it's so good, but sometimes like I want to know more about what you actually do, because like what do you actually do sometimes, like asking me on that. So sometimes as a company and as a brand, as a commercial company, you do want people to think, right, if you want that, you go and speak to them. So, and that sometimes for me is like, right, well, okay, when can I help Andy, or when can I refer them into that? So I think it's all well and good sometimes having less of a label, but you also do need a clear identity and label on that side of it as well. How
I completely agree. I think you need to be known for something, otherwise you're not known for anything really, are you? And you need to, because the biggest, I think, sometimes, I use the word compliment, but or value, I suppose, is that you're talked about in rooms when you're not there for the right reasons, for the reasons that you want. So those opportunities will come when you don't even know that they're coming, because someone else is talking about you or something along those lines. That's ultimate. I think that's a really important aspect. So yes, from a brand perspective, from a business perspective, there needs to be really clear. But what you're probably also, there's an element here that we probably haven't touched on hugely, which is that difference between being the face of a brand and a brand as well. Like, say you've got an element of kind of personal branding that goes above and beyond PhysiQuip. So if for any reason PhysiQuip didn't exist, you would still exist within the market, and vice versa, I suppose, really. But that's important, isn't it? That and you see this quite a lot. I see it quite a lot, probably because of the area I'm working in at the moment, but around athletes and things, that they actually have a career post being a footballer, and actually there are people doing some work in this area of how do you, it might be from a branding perspective, but it also may be from like having a plan, having a career path, having personal development or a network that means that you exist kind of past that as well. But yeah, I definitely agree, for a commercial company, you need to know people need to know what you do. Yeah. Otherwise, that becomes a bit messy, doesn't it?
It does, and it's vague, and it's just like, you want it to just be, right, they
but
do
you're
that,
much clearer on that now. Like, you've done all your branding work and everything, and...
Yeah. No, we are, and I think... But it's
education and technology and MSK.
Basically that is what it is, and I think as well is, it's like, right, well, you just, as with any of these things, you say it once, and you think, okay, right, I've said it now.
No, you have to keep saying it and keep saying it. Yeah.
Hence me doing a lot of selfies, and hence me doing a lot of these podcasts. It's like, get my face next to all the great people like you on that bit. But that is genuinely part of our strategy for doing it. And I think you mentioned athletes there. Like, you do look at it, and I love Danny Donachie's stuff that he puts on LinkedIn and social media. And it's you do think you look at a lot of these sports stars, and you just think it's such a football, particularly, is such a bizarre place.
It's so cutthroat, isn't it?
It's cutthroat. You've got these individual athletes playing in a team. There's so many different stakeholders in there, and then when they finish, I think there's a real element of distrust, or who can they trust? Because everyone wants to be seen with them. Everyone wants to, probably get access to their money. When I say everyone, a lot of people do. And I think that is a real challenge within that area, and it's why you look at football, and football's so exciting, but also you just look at it behind the scenes, and it's like, it just does not look healthy to me at all.
I see, and again, it's probably algorithm driven to some degree, but there seems to be quite a lot of, grassroots isn't the right word, but practitioner bubbling of how undervalued they feel within these high performance elite environments, and how that's not why they went into coaching, or that's not why they went into those environments. And you've got that real mismatch, I suppose, or poor stakeholder management of how staff are treated and how players are treated, like backroom versus front. Like it's not an area I'm an expert at all, but I see some things and think, well, there's some real organisational and cultural and leadership challenges being faced by these organisations at the moment, especially in a hugely commercial, high stakes money environments as well.
Yeah, well, it was I don't know if you saw that thing at Nottingham Forest where they had the owner came onto the pitch and looked like he was hammering the manager because they'd just drawn with Leicester, which was really important for them getting into the Champions League, which, he got a lot of stick for. And then his defence to it was he came out and said, actually, I was really annoyed with the manager because the medical team hadn't noticed that this person had a very serious injury, and it was a very serious thing. But you just think they kind of said, right, actually, we're going to diffuse this by saying we weren't giving the manager stick, we were giving stick about the medical team and doing that. And it was wasn't really much said about that. It was like, oh, right, okay, they're just trying to diffuse that area. But it just was like, and that came up a lot in the round table that we talked about, was about just the value of actually the medical team. They're actually a necessary evil, or you've got those people there, which is not great for anyone's psychology, bearing in mind how much effort 24/7 you're needed within that elite sport environment. And healthcare is an interesting one, isn't it? Because you're constantly giving, and Anisha Joshua did the post with her, and it's like you can't give from an empty cup, and so it's looking after yourself is really important as well.
Yeah, and that is a real balance in that you don't want to be seen as I'm not fully committed, but it's okay to also have boundaries around I'm a person, and my career, my life is probably going to continue after this role and job as well, and therefore I need to get out of it what I need out of it to move forward as well at whatever point that becomes. So yeah, there's definitely an element around kind of self-awareness and that. But none of this, we did personal and professional development as a module in undergraduate, but it was so set up for the NHS and working in the NHS and agenda for change and things like that. I'd be really interested what graduates are now receiving, especially when there's more going into private practice and commercial settings. There's also, it's much more common to have multiple, we occasionally would have a band 5 role and you might do a bit of pitch side at the weekend or have an odd private clinic, but I think it's much more common now to have multiple roles where you might be 2 days one place, 3 days somewhere else, and working on a side hustle somewhere else, which is nothing even to do with healthcare or something. So yeah, you have to wear multiple hats at a much earlier part of your career, and I'm sure a lot of people will thrive in that, but other people may struggle in that as well.
So wrapping up, identity. What are things to consider, would you say, for anyone?
I think it's that, and it sounds a bit corny, but it's got to be true. You have to know who you are, don't you, as a person, and you have to go on a bit of a internal journey as to who you are, and therefore you won't associate yourself, or your association won't be solely with what that title of that job is, or that role in particular, because the reality is that will flux, that will change, there will be phases and different chapters in your life, and so building a really robust professional skill set, being resilient internally and knowing what you stand for and what drives you and what environments you want to work in is really key. And then having a wider network that allows you to transition roles, learn in different ways, maintain curiosity, always thinking around what might be next, and allow you to have that blue sky thinking if you want to, will allow your identity to evolve. It's not static in your life. You will change at different points in your life, and you want to be able to kind of flow with that.
Yeah, definitely. Brilliant, Nicola. Thank you very much for talking. Love it as always, and speak to you soon.
Thank you, Andy.